So that was Julian Assange speaking during a webcast from the Ecuadorian embassy here in London. Let's just discuss this a little bit further. We're joined by our legal affairs correspondent, Clive Coleman. Clive, lots to sort of dissect here, but just one of the main points that Julian Assange was making, that he could potentially be leaving soon. What kind of implication does that have for him?
Well, if he left soon, the legal position is really unchanged. And the legal position is that if he left the Ecuadorian embassy, he would be arrested by the British police and then he would be extradited to Sweden to face those allegations of sexual assault. And that would happen within a 10-day period. Now, there's been some suggestion that his health is, that he is in poor health and that perhaps that would be a bar to extradition. That isn't the case. It may be that if he needs hospital treatment in this country, then that 10-day period for extradition could be expanded somewhat. But health grounds alone will not provide another legal avenue. The legal issues in this case have been fought, and they were fought all the way to the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court, who 2 years ago decided by a strong majority that Julian Assange had no grounds for resisting extradition. It all came down to one point in the end, one legal point. He was arguing that the prosecuting authorities in Sweden that had requested his extradition were not a, quote, judicial authority under the legislation which governs the European arrest warrant scheme. The Supreme Court decided no, they were, and his extradition should take place. Now, as I say, nothing really has changed since that time, and if he sets foot outside the embassy, the overwhelming likelihood is he will be arrested. If he needs medical care, he'll be taken under guard to a hospital. He'll get that, but he'll be extradited to face those allegations within 10 days.
But he was making this implication that the stance, the attitude in the UK, these extradition laws have somewhat changed. So that isn't the case.
Yeah, I was puzzled by that because there's been no change to the European arrest warrant scheme, as far as I'm aware, that would affect Julian Assange. The scheme came in after 9/11. It's a fast-track extradition scheme. It takes all the politics out of extradition. It's based on a simple idea, if you like, that every justice system within Europe, the Swedish, the French, the British, is of equal quality. You get as fair a trial in one as you get in another. So it's extremely difficult to resist extradition. Julian Assange tried vigorously to do so, and I say went all the way to the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court, and he failed. So nothing really has changed in that time. I'm not quite sure what was being alluded to there by changes. The extradition laws that I've spoken to this morning, pretty confident nothing has changed, and if he sets foot outside the embassy, he will be arrested, he will be extradited.
And Clive, just briefly, I know very complicated, but just briefly, if you could, he's annoyed that the press are misrepresenting, mistelling his story, that he faces these charges, but they're not charges yet, but it's all very different.
Yeah, I mean, under the European arrest warrant scheme, he doesn't need to be charged in Sweden. Allegations are a well-founded allegation, or an allegation that the prosecuting authorities say is well-founded, is sufficient. So that is sufficient. The fact that he hasn't been charged doesn't affect the extradition to Sweden. He's also said that if he goes to Sweden, he could face charges from the United States. Now, there is an investigation into him in the United States. The United States have not formally sought his extradition. Interestingly, that if they did seek his extradition from Sweden, they would also need the permission, the consent of the British government. For he couldn't just be extradited from Sweden to the United States. There is a protection built in that the original surrendering country, ourselves, would have to give our permission for him to be extradited on to the United States. If, for instance, the criminal proceedings in Sweden collapsed and the United States then sought his extradition, we would have to give our consent. It's a protection for people. It's not that one country can just grab somebody and extradite them. They have to go back to the original surrendering country, ourselves. We have to give our consent.
Clive, thank you very much for clarifying all of that. Our legal affairs correspondent, Clive Coleman, thank you as always. Now,